The massive frame of Silas Mercer filled the doorway of the general store like some ancient nightmare made flesh. He slammed his fist on the counter hard enough to crack the wood, his voice raw with desperation. "I need a wife today." Every customer froze. The savage recluse parents warned their children about was begging. "Tomorrow a train brings me daughter. A daughter I never knew existed. If I don't have a family waiting when she arrives, they'll take her away forever." His steel grey eyes found Ilara Voss behind the counter. The autumn wind carried the smell of coming snow through Redemption Ridge that afternoon, slicing through the dusty main street like a warning. Ilara was restocking shelves when the door exploded inward, rattling every jar of preserves on the wall. She didn't scream. She had stopped screaming years ago. But when she turned and saw Silas Mercer filling the doorway, even her carefully built calm wavered. The man was enormous, not just tall, though he stood well over 6 feet, but built like he had been carved from the same granite that formed the mountains behind town. His beard was wild and dark, threaded with premature grey. His clothes looked as though they had survived a war, buckskin worn thin at the elbows, boots caked with mud and darker things. A coat that might once have been brown, but was now the colour of dried blood and mountain storms. It was his eyes that made people cross the street, steel grey and haunted, carrying the weight of things no man should have seen and things no man should have done. Those eyes found hers, and for one brief moment, Ilara saw something she had never expected in Silas Mercer's face. Terror. "I need to talk to you," he said, voice rough from disuse. "Private." The store fell silent. Mrs. Thornton clutched her basket of thread. Young Tommy Bradford stood frozen by the pickle barrel. Everyone knew the stories about Silas Mercer, how he had survived the mine collapse that killed 17 men, how he had vanished into the mountains afterward and only came down twice a year for supplies, how trappers sometimes heard him talking to ghosts in the high passes, how Marshal Brodie had once tried to check on him in a brutal winter and been met on the trail with a rifle and a promise that the next man who came looking would not make it back down. Ilara met his gaze without flinching. She had built her life on not flinching. "Whatever you need to say, you can say it here, Mr. Mercer." Something flickered across his face. Frustration, perhaps, or shame. "Please." The word sounded as though it had cost him everything. "It's about a child." That changed everything. Ilara set down the can of peaches she had been holding. "Mrs. Thornton, would you mind watching the counter for a few minutes?" The older woman's eyes widened. "Ilara, you can't be serious. You don't know what he—" "5 minutes," Ilara said quietly. She had learned long ago that the firmest words were the quiet ones. She led Silas to the back room, acutely aware of how small the space became with him inside it. He had to duck beneath the door frame. His shoulders nearly touched both walls. Up close, she could see the exhaustion carved into his face. The man looked as though he had not slept in days. "I'm listening," she said. Silas removed his hat. His hands shook. "I got a telegram 2 weeks ago from a lawyer in Denver. A woman named Lillian Walsh died of fever. Before she passed, she told them about me. She told them I had a daughter." Ilara felt something cold settle in her stomach. "A daughter, 7 years old. Her name is Ivy." His voice cracked on the name. "Lillian and I were together before the mine collapse. I was different then. I had plans. I thought I would make something of myself." He looked down at his scarred hands. After the collapse, I wasn't the same. I couldn't sleep without seeing the dark pressing in. I couldn't stop hearing the men screaming. I told Lillian I needed time, told her I would write, but I didn't. No, he admitted, the word falling like a confession. She wrote me. Letters came to the assay office in town for months. I never picked them up. I never wanted her to see what I had become. I thought I was doing her a favour, letting her move on. His jaw clenched. She was pregnant. She tried to tell me in those letters. She raised our daughter alone, worked herself half to death doing it. Elara had seen enough tragedy in her 32 years to recognise it in someone else. This was not a man seeking sympathy. This was a man drowning in guilt and desperately searching for air. The telegram said Ivy is arriving on the morning train from Denver. Silas continued, but there is a problem. The lawyer contacted Judge Whitaker here in town and told him the situation. Whitaker said a child cannot live with an unmarried trapper who disappears into the mountains for months at a time. It isn't proper. It isn't safe. If I cannot prove I have a stable family home when that train arrives, they will send her to an orphanage in Sacramento. I will never see her again. The pieces clicked into place. That is why you are here, Elara said slowly. You need someone to pretend to be your wife, not pretend. Silas pulled a folded paper from his coat. A real marriage. Legal. Judge Whitaker already knows about it. I went to him this morning and told him I was engaged. He said if I am married before the train arrives, he will approve the placement. Elara stared at him. You told the judge you were engaged. To whom? I did not have a name yet. He met her eyes. I am asking you. The audacity of it stole her breath. Mr. Mercer, you cannot possibly... I know what I am asking, he cut in, but there was no anger in it, only raw desperation. I know we are strangers. I know my reputation. I know I have no right to ask any woman for this kind of help. Then why me? Because you are alone, too. The words struck harder than they should have. I see you in town sometimes, Silas said quietly. You work this store 7 days a week. You never close early. You never take a day off. You are always pleasant to customers, but you never let anyone too close. You live in the room above the store by yourself. No family visits. No gentleman callers. You have built a life where you do not need anyone. That is my choice, I know. That is why I am asking, because you understand what it means to want to be left alone. I am not offering romance or companionship or any of that. I am offering a business arrangement. Elara's mind raced. What kind of arrangement? You marry me tomorrow morning before the train arrives. We present ourselves to Judge Whitaker as a proper married couple with a home ready for a child. You help me keep custody of my daughter for 1 year. That is what the judge requires to ensure stability. After that, the marriage ends. You receive an annulment and return to your life. I take full responsibility for Ivy in the mountains. And what do I receive? Silas reached into his coat once more and placed a small leather pouch on the table between them. The weight of it made a solid sound. $1,400. Every cent I have saved in 7 years. It is yours whether the arrangement succeeds or not. I will also sign over the deed to this building. Elara blinked. This building? I own it. I bought it 5 years ago when the previous owner died and his widow needed quick cash. I have been renting it back to you through a land agent, so you would not know. He saw her expression and added quickly, "I was not trying to deceive you. I simply knew that if you realized I owned it, you might feel obligated. I wanted you to feel secure here." She did not know what to do with that information. "So you are offering me $1,400 and this building in exchange for 1 year as your wife?" "In name only," he clarified. "I have a cabin in the mountains, 3 rooms. You and Ivy can have the bedroom. I will sleep in the main room by the fire. I will not touch you. I will not expect anything except that you help me create a home stable enough that they do not take my daughter away." Elara wanted to refuse. Every rational part of her mind screamed that this was madness. But something in his eyes stopped her. She had seen that same look in her own mirror years ago when she first arrived in Redemption Ridge, running from ghosts she could not outrun. The look of someone who had lost everything and was making one final, desperate gamble to save what mattered. "Why did you not ask someone else?" she asked. Mrs. Thornton might have agreed. Sarah Chen at the boarding house. "Because they would eventually want something real," Silas said. "They would want affection or companionship, or they would convince themselves that love could grow. You will not. You understand walls, Miss Voss. You have built them as high as mine." He was not wrong. "I need an answer," he pressed. "The train arrives in the morning." Elara closed her eyes. She thought of the little girl on that train, 7 years old, mother dead, father a stranger, being sent to an orphanage full of other unwanted children. She thought of another little girl in another time and place, a student who had needed help that Elara had been too afraid to give. Sophie. When she opened her eyes, Silas was watching her with the intensity of a man watching his last hope slip away. "What is the little girl's name again?" she asked quietly. "Ivy. Ivy Lillian Mercer. Does she know about me? That I exist?" "Lillian told her everything before she died. She told her I was her father. She told her," his voice roughened, "she told her I was a good man once, that I had made mistakes, but that I had loved Lillian truly." "Did you?" "Yes." No hesitation. "I did. I do. That is what makes it worse. I loved her enough that I should have been brave enough to stay. Instead, I was a coward who convinced himself he was being noble." Elara respected honesty, even when it was ugly, especially when it was ugly. "This marriage," she said slowly, "would have to look real. Judge Whitaker is not a fool. Neither are the people in this town. If we cannot convince them, this will not work. I know that means living together, presenting ourselves as a family, attending church socials if required, acting like a married couple," Silas finished. "I understand. I will do whatever is necessary. So will you, or you would not still be considering this." He read her too well. "I need to think," Elara said. "I do not have time for, 5 minutes, Mr. Mercer. Give me 5 minutes alone." He looked as though he wanted to argue, but something in her face stopped him. He nodded once and stepped out, pulling the door closed behind him. Elara sat in the sudden silence, hands pressed flat on the table. $1,400, the deed to this building, financial security she would never have otherwise. But that was not why she was considering it. She looked at the far wall where a small photograph hung in a tarnished frame. A schoolhouse back east, children lined up in front, one little girl in the second row with dark braids and a gap-toothed smile. Sophie, the girl who had run away into a blizzard because home was not safe. And the teacher who had noticed had not been brave enough to act. The girl who had frozen to death 3 miles from town, trying to reach the schoolhouse where she thought someone might protect her. Elara had left teaching after that. She had left Pennsylvania, left everything. She had come west to disappear into a place where no one knew her failures. She had been running for 6 years. Perhaps it was time to stop. She stood and opened the door. Silas turned immediately, reading her face. "I have conditions," she said. Relief crashed across his features. "Anything." "First, Ivy comes first in everything. This is not about us. It is about giving her a safe home and a chance at a real life." "Agreed." "Second, if at any point I believe you are a danger to her, the arrangement ends immediately. I do not care what Judge Whittaker says. I do not care about the money. Do you understand?" His eyes hardened, not with anger, but with resolve. "If I am ever a danger to my daughter, I will leave myself. You will not have to ask. Third, after the year ends and the marriage is annulled, I want regular updates about how she is doing. Not detailed letters, just proof of life, proof she is safe and cared for." Something shifted in his expression. "Understanding, perhaps. You have lost a child before," he said quietly. Elara's throat tightened. "I failed a child before. I will not do it again." Silas nodded slowly. "You will receive your updates every month if you want them. Fourth and final condition. You tell her the truth. Not today. Maybe not even this year. But eventually. Ivy deserves to know this marriage began as an arrangement. She deserves to understand why, even if it hurts her, especially if it hurts her. Children are not stupid, Mr. Mercer. They know when adults are lying. Better to hurt her with honesty than to lose her trust with convenient stories." He studied her for a long moment. "You would have made a good mother." The words landed like a blow. "Don't," Elara said sharply. "Do not make assumptions about what I would have been. We have a business arrangement to finalize. That is all." Silas had the grace to look abashed. "You are right. I apologize." She took a breath and steadied herself. "When do we need to do this?" "Reverend Hale will perform the ceremony tomorrow morning early. That gives us time before the train arrives." "You already arranged it." "I told him I had a bride. I simply did not mention she did not know it yet." Despite everything, Elara felt a flicker of dark amusement. That is either confidence or insanity. Probably both. For the first time, something that might have been humour touched his eyes. It transformed his face completely, made him look almost human. Then it was gone. "Oh, I will need to close the store," Elara said, her mind already cataloguing what needed to be done. "Pack my things. Make arrangements. I will help." She almost refused, but something stopped her. Perhaps it was the exhaustion in his face. Perhaps it was the realization that by morning she would be married to a stranger and living in a mountain cabin with his traumatized daughter. Perhaps it was simply too late to pretend this was not happening. "All right," she said, "but first go to Mrs. Thornton and apologize for scaring her. Then go to Hale's boarding house and rent a room for the night. Clean yourself up. I will not marry a man who smells as though he has been dead for a week." Silas looked down at himself as if seeing his condition for the first time. "I came straight from the high country when I received the telegram. I did not think about tomorrow morning. Church, clean clothes, trimmed beard. Can you manage that?" "Yes." "Then go." He hesitated at the door. "Miss Voss, thank you. You are saving my daughter's life. I will not forget that." She did not know how to respond. so she said nothing. After he left, she stood alone in the back room for a long moment, listening to the whispers beginning in the store beyond. By nightfall, the whole town would know. By morning, the gossip would be catastrophic. Alara Voss, the quiet storekeeper who never looked twice at any man, marrying Silas Mercer after a single conversation. Let them talk. She had work to do. The next hours passed in a blur of activity that left no room for second thoughts. Alara closed the store early. Ignoring the disappointed protests, she packed her few belongings into 2 carpet bags, clothes, books, the photograph of the schoolhouse she could not bring herself to leave behind. Her entire life in Redemption Ridge fit into 2 bags and a small trunk. That probably said something about the life she had been living. Mrs. Thornton appeared at her door around sunset, wringing her hands. Alara, dear, people are saying the most awful things. They are saying you are marrying that mountain devil. Tell me it is not true. It is true. The older woman's face went pale. But why? What hold does he have over you? If he has threatened you, we can tell Marshal Brodie. No one threatened me, Helen. I am marrying him of my own free will. But you do not even know him. Alara continued, folding a shawl. How well did you know Harold before you married him? That was different. We courted properly. There were social engagements, proper chaperones. You met him in April and married him in May, Alara said mildly. 6 weeks. And you told me yourself you barely spoke 10 words to him before the wedding because you were too nervous. Mrs. Thornton's mouth worked soundlessly. I appreciate your concern, Alara continued, but my decision is made. Mr. Mercer and I have an understanding. We will be caring for his daughter together. His daughter? Mrs. Thornton's eyes widened. What daughter? That man does not have a... He does. She's arriving tomorrow from Denver. Her mother recently passed away. Understanding dawned on the older woman's face, followed quickly by something that looked like pity. Oh, Alara, you are doing this for the child. I am doing this for several reasons. The child is one of them. You cannot save them all, dear. What happened to that little girl back east, Good night, Helen. Alara's voice was cold enough to freeze the words in Mrs. Thornton's throat. I need to finish packing. The older woman left, and Alara immediately felt guilty for her tone. But she could not afford softness right now. She could not afford to let anyone see the cracks in her resolve. This was happening. She had made her choice. Now she had to live with it. She did not sleep that night. Instead, she sat by the window, watching moonlight paint silver across the empty street, thinking about all the choices that had led her to this moment. Teaching had once been her life. She had been good at it, patient with slow learners, firm with troublemakers, creative in finding ways to make lessons stick. The children had loved her, but love had not been enough to save Sophie. The little girl had come to school with bruises sometimes, had flinched when anyone moved too quickly, had made excuses about falling downstairs or running into doors. Alara had suspected. She had watched. She had even begun composing a letter to the county authorities. But she had hesitated, waited for more proof, convinced herself she might be wrong, that accusing Sophie's father without evidence would make everything worse. Then came the blizzard. Sophie had run away in the middle of the night, barefoot and wearing only her nightgown. By the time they found her the next morning, she had frozen to death, curled against the schoolhouse door, trying to get inside, trying to reach the teacher who had noticed but had not acted. Alara had left Pennsylvania within the week. She could not bear to look at the schoolhouse anymore. She could not face the other teachers who whispered that it was not her fault, that she had done nothing wrong because she had done something wrong. She had seen a child in danger and had chosen caution over courage. She would not make that mistake again. Morning came too quickly and too slowly at the same time. Alara dressed in her best clothes, a simple dress of dove-grey wool with a white collar. Not wedding white. She was not a bride in any real sense. This was a business arrangement dressed in legal language. But her hands still shook as she pinned up her hair. She arrived at the church early. Reverend Hale was waiting on the steps, looking profoundly uncomfortable. "Miss Voss, I feel compelled to ask one more time if you are entering into this union of your own free will." "I am, Reverend. And you understand the sacred nature of marriage, the vows you will be taking?" Alara met his eyes. "I understand that a 7-year-old girl needs a home. I understand that her father is trying to provide one. And I understand that sometimes we are called to do difficult things for the sake of children who cannot save themselves." The Reverend's expression softened slightly. "Helen Thornton mentioned the child. That is why you are doing this, at least in part. What is the other part?" Alara glanced up the street where Silas was approaching, and her breath caught despite herself. He had actually done it. The wild mountain man had transformed into something almost civilized. He wore a dark suit that must have been borrowed. It fit reasonably well across his massive shoulders, but was slightly short in the sleeves. His beard was trimmed close to his jaw, revealing the strong bones of his face. His hair was still too long, tied back with a leather cord, but it was clean. He looked terrified. "The other part," Alara said quietly, still watching Silas approach, "is that I recognize someone trying to make amends for past failures. I respect that." Silas reached them and stopped, looking between Alara and the Reverend with the expression of a man facing execution. "Morning," he said roughly. "You look presentable, Mr. Mercer," Alara said. Something that might have been relief flickered across his face. "Borrowed the suit from Hale at the boarding house. He is shorter than me." "I noticed." An awkward silence descended. Reverend Hale cleared his throat. "Shall we begin? I have asked my wife to serve as witness." They moved inside the small church. Mrs. Hale sat in the front pew, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief, though nothing sad had happened yet. Morning light streamed through the simple windows, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. It would have been beautiful if Alara's heart had not been hammering so hard she could barely breathe. Silas stood beside her, so tall she had to tilt her head back to see his face. Up close, she could see the scars, one across his left eyebrow, another along his jaw, a third disappearing into his collar. The mind collapse had marked him inside and out. "Dearly beloved," Reverend Hale began, and Alara forced herself to focus on the words rather than the surreal impossibility of what she was doing. The ceremony was brief. Hale seemed eager to finish quickly, as if speed might somehow make it less binding. When it came time for the vows, Silas's voice was steady. "Arms. I, Silas Mercer, take you, Alara Voss, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to provide for you, protect you, and honour you as long as this arrangement stands." Hale's eyebrows shot up at the word arrangement, but he did not interrupt. Alara took a breath. "I, Alara Voss, take you, Silas Mercer, to be my lawfully wedded husband. I promise to help you build a home, care for your daughter, and honour the agreement we have made." It was not poetry. It was not romantic. But it was honest. "The rings?" Hale asked. Silas produced 2 simple gold bands from his pocket. Elara wondered where he had gotten them on such short notice, then decided she did not want to know. He slid one onto her finger. His hands were huge, scarred, and surprisingly gentle. She did the same for him, and realized with a start that her hand was smaller than his palm. "By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife," Hale said, with obvious reluctance. "You may. That is, it is customary to—" "No," Silas said quickly, seeing the panic in Elara's eyes. "That will not be necessary." Hale looked relieved. "Then I suppose you are married. Congratulations." It was possibly the least enthusiastic blessing ever given. They signed the certificate in Hale's office. Elara's hand shook as she wrote her name, but the signature was legible. Silas signed with surprising precision, his handwriting better than she had expected. When it was done, Reverend Hale handed them the paper. "I will file this with the county clerk this afternoon. In the eyes of the law and of heaven, you are now man and wife." Elara stared at the certificate, her name next to his, 2 signatures binding them together. What had she done? "We need to go," Silas said quietly. "The train arrives soon. We should meet with Judge Whittaker first, show him the certificate, then head to the station." "Right. The reason for all this?" "Ivy." They thanked the Reverend and stepped out into the cool morning air. The street was beginning to come alive. Shop owners opening shutters, the baker lighting his ovens, children running errands before school. Normal people doing normal things, while Elara stood on the church steps next to the man she had just married, feeling as though she had stepped off the edge of the world and had not yet hit bottom. "You all right?" Silas asked. "No," she said honestly, "but I will be. Let's go see Judge Whittaker." They walked through town side by side, not touching, but close enough that people stared. News of the wedding had already spread. Curtains twitched. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Heads turned to follow their progress. Let them stare. Judge Whittaker's office was in the courthouse, a 2-story brick building that served as the center of Redemption Ridge's limited legal system. The judge himself was a barrel-chested man in his 60s with impressive mutton chops and a reputation for fairness that bordered on legendary. He looked up when they entered and set down his coffee cup with exaggerated care. "Well, Silas Mercer, and I presume this is the mysterious fiancée you mentioned yesterday." "My wife," Silas corrected, handing over the certificate. "We were married this morning." Whittaker studied the paper, his eyebrows climbing steadily higher. "Elara Voss, the woman who runs the general store." "Yes, sir. Known you for 6 years, miss. Mrs. Mercer, I should say. Did not know you and Silas here had even met." "We had not," Elara said calmly. "Not properly, but circumstances do not always allow for lengthy courtships." "Circumstances?" Whittaker's gaze sharpened. "Meaning the child arriving on this morning's train." "My daughter," Silas said. There was steel in his voice. "Ivy. And yes, her arrival is why I needed to marry quickly. But do not mistake speed for deception, Judge. This marriage is legal and binding." Whittaker leaned back in his chair, studying them both. "Legal, certainly. Binding, we shall see. I am not a fool, Silas. I know what this looks like. Looks like a man trying to keep his daughter," Silas said flatly. Looks like a marriage of convenience that will dissolve the moment my authority is removed. Whitaker shifted his attention to Ilara. Mrs. Mercer, do you understand what you have agreed to? Living in an isolated cabin with a man known for violence and instability, caring for a traumatized child you have never met. I understand perfectly, Judge Whitaker, and you are prepared for the reality of it. The hardship, the isolation. Ilara thought about the empty room above her store, the endless days of selling goods to people who never really knew her, the nights spent reading alone by lamplight, trying not to think about the child she had failed. I have been isolated for 6 years, Judge. At least now I will have a purpose. Something in her voice must have convinced him, because Whitaker's expression softened slightly. All right, I will approve the placement on one condition. I want to see this family in 6 months. I will visit the cabin, speak to the child, ensure she is being properly cared for. If I find evidence of neglect or abuse, I will remove her immediately, and the marriage certificate will not protect you. Understood, Silas and Ilara said in unison. Whitaker signed the necessary papers and handed them over. The train arrives soon. I will meet you at the station to finalize the transfer of custody. Do not be late. They left the courthouse and stood on the street, legally married for less than an hour, about to become parents to a child neither of them really knew. We should eat something, Silas said. It will be a long day. They went to the small cafe near the station. The morning crowd fell silent when they entered, but Silas ignored them with the practiced ease of a man used to being the subject of whispers. They ordered coffee and biscuits and sat across from each other in awkward silence. Finally, Ilara spoke. Tell me about her, Ivy. What do you know? Silas pulled a worn photograph from his pocket and slid it across the table. A little girl stared back from the image. Dark hair in braids, serious eyes, a small, uncertain smile. Lillian sent this with the telegram, Silas said quietly. It is 6 months old. The lawyer said Ivy is smart, reads above her grade level, likes drawing and animals. She has been helping care for her mother during the illness, so she is used to responsibility. She is 7, Ilara said. She should not have had to care for anyone. No. Silas's jaw tightened. She should not. But her mother was dying, and they had no family, so she did what she had to do. Ilara traced the edge of the photograph with one finger. She looks like you. The eyes. Yeah. Something painful crossed Silas's face. Lillian used to say Ivy had my stubborn streak too. Would not accept help even when she needed it. Sounds familiar? Their eyes met, and for a moment, understanding passed between them. 2 stubborn people who would rather suffer alone than accept help, now raising a child who had probably inherited that same damn tendency. This was going to be interesting. The cafe door opened and Marshal Brody stepped in. His eyes immediately found them. He crossed the room with deliberate slowness. Silas, Ilara, I hear congratulations are in order. News travels fast in a town this size, Ilara said. Brody pulled up a chair without being invited. Helen Thornton was knocking on doors by dawn. Half the territory knows by now. He fixed Silas with a hard stare. I am going to ask you this once. Is she doing this willingly? Ask her yourself, Silas said evenly. Brody turned to Ilara. Well, no one forced me, Jacob. I made my own choice, for the child, among other reasons. Brody shook his head slowly. You are either the bravest woman I have ever met, or the most foolish. Time will tell which. He stood. But know this, Silas. If anything happens to her, If I hear even a whisper that you have raised a hand or spoken a harsh word, I will come for you, and I will not be gentle about it." "Understood," Silas said, without heat. "But you will not hear whispers, because there will not be cause for them." Brody looked as though he wanted to say more, but footsteps on the platform outside interrupted them. The train was early. They all turned toward the window. Black smoke rose above the buildings, accompanied by the shriek of the whistle. Ivy was here. Alara's heart kicked into a faster rhythm. Beside her, Silas had gone absolutely rigid, his knuckles white where he gripped the table edge. "Ready?" she asked quietly. "No." His voice was rough. "But it does not matter. Let's go." They left money on the table and stepped out into the cool morning. Judge Whittaker was already hurrying toward the station, official documents clutched in his hand. The train hissed to a stop, steam billowing across the platform. Doors opened. Passengers began disembarking. And then Alara saw her, a tiny figure in a black dress too large for her frame, carrying a single battered carpet bag, dark braids tied with faded ribbons, those same serious eyes from the photograph, but older somehow, sadder. Ivy Mercer stood alone on the platform, looking small and lost and utterly terrified. Silas made a sound low in his throat, half sob, half something else entirely. Then he was moving, crossing the platform in long strides that ate up the distance. Ivy saw him coming and froze. Father and daughter stared at each other. 7 years of absence hung between them. 7 years of letters unread and a life built without him. Silas dropped to one knee so he would be at her level. "Ivy," he said, and his voice broke on her name. I'm your father." The little girl's face did not change. "I know who you are." The coldness in her voice would have frozen a lesser man, but Silas did not flinch. "Your mother, she told you about me. She told me you left, that you did not want us." Direct hit. Alara saw it land like a physical blow. "That is not..." Silas stopped, closed his eyes, tried again. "I left because I was broken and stupid and convinced myself it was for the best. But I was wrong, Ivy. I was so wrong. Your mother deserved better. You deserved better. But you did not come back." "No, I did not." Silas's hands clenched on his knees. "I cannot change that. I cannot undo it. All I can do is promise that I am here now, and I am not leaving again." Ivy's lower lip trembled. "Mama said people who leave always leave again." Alara's chest tightened painfully. "Your mama was right to be careful," Silas said. "Right to protect you. But I am asking for a chance to prove I am different. To prove I want to know you. To be your father, if you will let me." "I do not need a father." The words came out fierce and small at the same time. "I took care of Mama. I can take care of myself." Before Silas could respond, Judge Whittaker stepped forward. "Miss Mercer, my name is Judge Whittaker. I am here to ensure you are placed in a safe, stable home. Your father has made arrangements." "He is not my father." Ivy's voice cut like glass. "Fathers do not abandon their families." The platform had gone silent. Every passenger, every worker, every person within earshot was watching this devastating little drama unfold. Alara could not stand it anymore. She stepped forward and knelt beside Silas, so she was eye level with Ivy. "Hello," she said quietly. "My name is Alara. You are absolutely right. Your father made terrible mistakes. He hurt you and your mother. You do not have to forgive him for that. You do not have to call him father if you do not want to. Ivy's gaze shifted to her, wary, but listening. But here is the truth, Alara continued. You are 7 years old. You just lost your mother. You are scared and angry and probably tired of adults making decisions for you without asking what you want. I understand that, so I am going to give you a choice. Judge Whittaker started to object, but Alara silenced him with a look. You can come home with us, she said to Ivy, to a cabin in the mountains where we will do our best to take care of you. It will not be perfect. We will make mistakes, but we will try. Or, she held up a hand when Whittaker sputtered, you can tell Judge Whittaker that you would prefer the orphanage in Sacramento. I will not lie and say it will be comfortable, but it will be yours to choose. Alara, Silas said sharply. What? I'm letting her have some control over her own life, Alara said without looking at him. Something adults rarely give children. Ivy stared at her for a long moment. Those grey eyes, so like Silas's, searched Alara's face as if looking for deception. Who are you? The little girl finally asked. I am your father's wife. As of about 2 hours ago. Ivy's eyes widened. You married him. Why? Honest question. Deserved an honest answer. Because he asked for help, and I was in a position to give it. Because I believe children deserve safe homes. And because Alara hesitated, then continued. Because a long time ago I failed a little girl who needed help. I do not want to fail another one. Something shifted in Ivy's expression, understanding perhaps, or recognition that she was talking to another damaged person. If I come with you, Ivy said slowly, and I do not like it, can I leave? Alara glanced at Judge Whittaker, who looked ready to have an apoplexy, but he nodded reluctantly. In 6 months, Judge Whittaker will visit to make sure you are being cared for properly. If you tell him you are unhappy or unsafe, he will listen. This is not a prison, Ivy. It is meant to be a home. The little girl looked between Alara and Silas, her small face grave with a decision no 7-year-old should have to make. Then her gaze dropped to the carpet bag she clutched. Mama's things are in here, she whispered. Her brush, her book, her locket. I cannot leave them. You will not have to, Silas said hoarsely. Anything you want to keep, you keep. I swear it. Ivy's eyes filled with tears. She was clearly fighting not to shed them. I want to see where we are going, she said finally, before I decide. Judge Whittaker looked as though he wanted to argue, but Alara spoke first. That is fair. Our cabin is about 3 hours from town by wagon. We will take you there, let you see it, and you can tell the judge your decision when he visits in 6 months. Does that work? Ivy nodded slowly. Whittaker sighed. Against my better judgment, I will allow it. But I will be watching the situation closely. He handed Silas the official custody papers. Do not make me regret this. They collected Ivy's single bag, heartbreaking how little remained of her entire life, and walked to where Silas had left his wagon. It was a sturdy vehicle, clearly built for mountain roads. The horse hitched to it was a massive bay gelding with patient eyes. Silas lifted Ivy into the back, where he had arranged blankets to make a nest of sorts. She sat stiffly, not looking at either of them. Alara climbed up front, while Silas took the reins, and then they were moving, leaving Redemption Ridge behind, leaving Alara's old life behind, heading into mountains and marriage and motherhood, all with a man she barely knew, and a child who had every right to hate them both. The wagon creaked. The horses' hooves struck steadily against packed dirt. Behind them, Ivy sat in silence, watching the town disappear. And Ilara realized with crystal clarity that there was no going back now. Whatever happened next, they would face it together, or they would fail together. But either way, she had made her choice. The wagon climbed into country that seemed to exist outside normal time. Pine forests pressed close to the narrow road, their shadows deep and cool, even in midday light. The air changed, thinner, sharper, carrying the smell of snow that had not yet fallen, but would soon. Ilara watched the landscape transform and felt her stomach tighten with each mile that separated them from town. This was not the gentle rolling hills around Redemption Ridge. This was wilderness that could kill you if you were not careful. Silas handled the reins with practiced ease, guiding the wagon around rocks and fallen branches that would have shattered an axle. He had not spoken since they left town, but she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw kept clenching. Behind them, Ivy remained silent. Ilara turned to check on her and found the little girl staring out at the forest with hollow eyes. Her carpet bag sat clutched in her lap like a life preserver. "Are you hungry?" Ilara asked. "I packed some." "No." The word was flat, final. "Thirsty?" I said no. Ilara exchanged a glance with Silas. His expression was grim, but unsurprised. This was not going to be easy. They continued in silence for another hour before Silas finally spoke. "There is a stream up ahead. We should water the horse." He pulled the wagon off the road into a small clearing where water ran clear over smooth stones. The gelding drank gratefully while Silas stretched his back, bones cracking audibly. Ivy climbed down without being asked and walked to the stream's edge, keeping her distance from both adults. "She hates me," Silas said quietly. He was not looking for contradiction, just stating a fact. "She does not know you well enough to hate you," Ilara replied. "Right now, she is just angry and scared and grieving her mother. Give her time." What if time is not enough? Ilara did not have an answer for that. She pulled out the food she had packed: bread, cheese, dried apples. Simple travelling fare. She brought some to Ivy, crouching beside her at the water's edge. "You should eat something," she said gently. "It is still a long ride." "I am not hungry, I know. But your body needs fuel even when your heart does not want it. Your mother would want you to take care of yourself." Ivy's head snapped up, eyes blazing. "Do not talk about my mother. You did not know her." "You are right. I did not, but I know she raised a daughter strong enough to survive losing her. That tells me everything I need to know about what kind of woman she was." Some of the fire went out of Ivy's expression, replaced by something more complicated. Grief, perhaps, or the terrible exhaustion that comes from trying to be strong for too long. She took the bread. A small victory. They ate in silence, then climbed back into the wagon. The road grew steeper, forcing the horse to lean into the harness. Silas walked beside the wagon now, easing the load, his boots finding purchase on rocks that would have slipped on. The man knew this country like it was written in his bones. Another hour passed. The sun shifted westward, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. Beautiful, if you had the luxury of appreciating it. Ilara was too focused on the drop-off beside the road, a sheer fall into nothing that made her palms sweat. Then the road rounded a bend, and the cabin came into view. It sat in a small valley, sheltered by towering pines, backed against a cliff face that would protect it from the worst winter winds. A stream ran nearby, the same one they had stopped at earlier, Elara realized, following it upstream. Smoke rose from the chimney in a thin, welcoming line. Someone had been here recently. "I came up yesterday," Silas said, reading her confusion. "Got the fire going, stocked wood, made sure everything was ready." He paused. "Wanted her to arrive to a warm home." Elara's throat tightened unexpectedly. The cabin itself was larger than she had expected. Solidly built from local timber, the logs chinked tight against winter cold. A covered porch ran along the front. The roof looked sound. The windows were intact. It was not grand, but it was well made and well maintained. The work of a man who knew how to survive. Silas brought the wagon to a stop. Ivy climbed down, looking at the cabin with an expression Elara could not read. "This is it," Silas said. There was uncertainty in his voice now, as though he was seeing the place through her eyes and finding it wanting. "It is not much, but it is quiet," Ivy interrupted. She walked toward the cabin slowly, as if approaching something that might bite. "Mama and me lived in a boarding house in Denver. There were always people, noise, shouting through the walls at night." She reached the porch steps and stopped. "Is it always this quiet?" "Mostly," Silas said. "Sometimes you hear animals, owls at night, elk in the meadow come dawn, wind through the pines, but no people, no shouting." Ivy nodded slowly, processing this. Then she climbed the steps and pushed open the door. Elara and Silas followed, watching as the little girl took in her new home. The main room was dominated by a stone fireplace where a fire crackled warmly. Simple furniture, a table, chairs, a worn sofa. Shelves lined one wall, mostly empty but clean. The floor was swept. The windows were clear. A door on the left led to the bedroom. Ivy walked to it like a ghost and pushed it open. Elara heard her gasp. The room beyond was small but carefully prepared. A bed with a handmade quilt in shades of blue and green. Shelves built at a child's height. A small table beneath the window with a chair sized for someone Ivy's age. And beside the bed, a rocking chair that looked as though it had been carved from a single piece of wood, polished until it gleamed. But it was what sat on the bed that made Ivy's composure finally crack. Wooden animals, dozens of them, carved with meticulous care. A deer with delicate antlers, a rabbit mid-hop, a fox with a bushy tail, an owl with individual feathers carved so finely they looked as though they might ruffle in a breeze. Ivy picked up the deer with shaking hands. "You made these," she whispered. Silas stood in the doorway, looking as though he wanted to run. Yeah, thought you might like them. Your mother's letter, the one I finally read, she mentioned you liked animals, drew pictures of them." He swallowed. "She said you got that from me, said I used to carve things, that I had gentle hands for such a big man." Ivy's voice was barely audible. "She said you used to carve things, that you had gentle hands for such a big man." Silas's eyes closed briefly. Pain etched into every line of his face. Ivy set the deer down carefully and turned to look at him. Really look at him. Maybe for the first time since the train platform. "Why did you not read her letters?" The question came out small and wounded. "If you loved her like you said, why did you not at least read them?" Silas moved into the room slowly, like approaching a wild animal. He knelt so he would be at her level, the same way he had at the station. "Because I was a coward," he said simply. The mind collapse. It broke something in me. I could not sleep in enclosed spaces anymore. I could not breathe right. I had nightmares where I was buried alive and everyone I loved was dying around me in the dark. Your mother deserved someone whole, and I was shattered. I thought if I stayed away, she could find someone better, someone who was not waking up screaming every night. But she loved you, Ivy said, and now tears were sliding down her face. She kept your picture by her bed. She told me stories about you, about how you made her laugh, how you promised to build her a house in the mountains where she could see the stars. Silas's breath hitched. She remembered that. She remembered everything, and she forgave you. Even when she was dying, she said, Ivy's voice broke. She said you were probably suffering somewhere, and she wished she could help you. She made me promise not to hate you, Ivy. Mom, but I do hate you. The words burst out of her like a dam breaking. I hate that you left. I hate that she worked herself sick, trying to provide for us alone. I hate that you were not there when she died. I hate that I am here with strangers instead of with her. I hate all of it. She was sobbing now, great heaving sobs that shook her small frame. Silas looked utterly lost, his hands hovering uselessly as though he wanted to reach for her, but did not know if he had the right. Alara made the decision for him. She stepped forward and wrapped her arms around Ivy, pulling the child against her. Ivy fought for a moment, then collapsed into the embrace, crying so hard Alara worried she might make herself sick. That is right, Alara murmured, stroking the girl's hair. Let it out. You have been holding it in too long. Silas knelt beside them, one large hand coming to rest gently on Ivy's back. The little girl stiffened at the touch, but did not pull away. They stayed like that while Ivy cried herself out. 3 broken people holding each other in a bedroom that smelled of pine and new beginnings. When the sobs finally subsided into hiccups, Ivy pulled back slightly, wiping her face with her sleeve. I am tired, she whispered. Then sleep, Alara said gently. We will be right outside if you need us. But Ivy shook her head. Do not leave. Not yet. I do not want to be alone. So they stayed. They helped Ivy out of her travelling clothes and into a nightgown she found in the carpet bag, worn soft from many washings. Probably one of the last things her mother had packed for her. Ivy climbed into bed, and Alara took the quilt around her, the same way she used to tuck in her students during rest time back when she was a teacher, back before Sophie. Silas sat in the rocking chair, looking completely out of place in the delicate piece of furniture he had built. But he sat anyway, and when Ivy's eyes started to drift closed, he began to talk. Not a story exactly, just words. He told her about the mountains in winter, when snow piled so high you had to dig tunnels to the woodshed, about the elk herd that came through every spring with their new calves, about the fox family that lived in the rocks behind the cabin and sometimes left half-eaten rabbits on the porch like gifts. His voice was low and rough, but there was something soothing in the steady rumble of it. Ivy's breathing deepened, evened out. Sleep, finally. Alara stood carefully, not wanting to wake her, and moved toward the door. Silas followed, and together they stepped out into the main room, pulling the bedroom door almost closed, but leaving it cracked. The silence that fell between them was heavy with things unsaid. Thank you, Silas said finally, for knowing what to do back there. I did not. You did fine, Alara interrupted. You told her the truth. You let her be angry. That is what she needed. She hates me. She is grieving. There is a difference. Alara moved to the fireplace, warming her hands against the chill that was settling into her bones. Give her time to sort through it. Silas paced the room like a caged animal. What if I cannot do this? What if I am not capable of being what she needs? Then you will fail, Alara said bluntly. But at least you will fail trying, which is more than you did before. He stopped pacing, stung. Good. He needed to hear it. I am not going to coddle you, Silas. You made choices that hurt people. You cannot undo that. All you can do is make better choices now and hope they are enough. And if they are not, she met his eyes. Then I will take Ivy somewhere safe, and you will sign whatever papers are necessary to give me custody. That was the deal. The child comes first. Something shifted in his expression. Respect, maybe, or the beginning of trust. Fair enough, he said. They stood in silence for a moment. Then Silas cleared his throat awkwardly. You should take the bedroom tonight. I will sleep out here by the fire. We cannot. Ivy needs to feel secure in that room like it is hers. Then where? We will figure it out. Alara looked around the cabin, assessing. The sofa was too small for either of them to sleep comfortably. The floor was an option, but not a good one. Her gaze landed on the loft above the main room, accessible by a ladder open to the room below, but separate. Up there, she said. We can put bedrolls in the loft, close enough to hear Ivy if she needs us, far enough to give her space. Silas nodded slowly. I have got extra blankets. I will set it up. While he climbed the ladder with armfuls of bedding, Alara unpacked the few things she had brought. Her clothes went into a trunk in the corner. Her books went on a shelf. The photograph of the schoolhouse she placed face down in the bottom of the trunk, unable to display it, but unwilling to leave it behind. She was hanging the last of her dresses when she heard a small sound from the bedroom. A whimper. She moved quickly, pushing the door open to find Ivy thrashing in bed, caught in a nightmare. Her face was twisted with fear, small hands clutching the quilt. No, she was mumbling. Mama, no, please do not go. Alara sat on the edge of the bed and gently touched Ivy's shoulder. Ivy, wake up. You're dreaming. The little girl's eyes flew open, wide and terrified. For a moment, she did not seem to recognize where she was, and panic flooded her features. It is all right, Alara said softly. You are safe. You're in the cabin. I am right here. Ivy's breathing gradually slowed. She looked around the dark room, at the wooden animals on the shelf, at Alara's face. I dreamed Mama was calling for me, but I could not find her, she whispered. She kept getting farther away, and I kept running, but I could not reach her. I am so sorry. Alara smoothed the hair back from Ivy's forehead. Those dreams are the worst kind. Do they ever stop? The honest answer was no. Alara still sometimes dreamed of Sophie frozen against the schoolhouse door, but that was not what Ivy needed to hear. They get easier, she said instead, less frequent, and eventually you will have other dreams too. Good ones mixed in with the hard ones. Ivy was quiet for a moment. Then, will you stay until I fall back asleep? Of course. Alara settled into the rocking chair, still warm from where Silas had sat earlier, and began to rock slowly. The motion was soothing, almost meditative. Alara. Ivy's voice was small in the darkness. Yes? Why did you really marry him? It was not just to help a stranger. Nobody does that. Smart child. Too smart. Alara considered lying. Then she remembered her own advice to Silas. Truth. Even when it hurt. A long time ago. I was a school teacher, she said quietly. I had a student who was being hurt at home. I suspected it, but I did not act fast enough. She ran away one night during a storm and died trying to reach safety. I have carried that failure with me ever since. Ivy was very still, listening. When your father told me about you, Alara continued, about a little girl who needed a home, I saw a chance to do something right, to help a child when it mattered, instead of hesitating until it was too late. So I'm like, your second chance? No. Alara shook her head firmly. You are not a chance to fix my past. You are a person who deserves a safe home, and adults who will fight for you. I am helping because it is the right thing to do, not because I am trying to ease my conscience. But it does ease it, Ivy said. A little bit. Does it not? The girl was 7 years old and reading Alara like a book. Yes, Alara admitted. A little bit. Is that wrong? Ivy thought about it. I do not think so. Mama used to say people can do good things for complicated reasons, and they are still good things. Your mother sounds like she was very wise. She was. Ivy's voice thickened with grief. She was the best person I ever knew, and now she is gone, and I am stuck with strangers in the middle of nowhere. The words should have hurt, but Alara understood them for what they were, a child speaking her truth, raw and unfiltered. We are strangers, Alara agreed. And this is nowhere, relatively speaking, but strangers can become family if everyone works at it. And sometimes nowhere is exactly where you need to be. Ivy did not respond, but her breathing was starting to even out again. Alara kept rocking until she was certain the girl was asleep, then carefully stood and moved toward the door. Apparently not asleep after all. What is it? The animals he carved. They are really good. They are. Does that mean maybe he is not all bad? Alara's heart twisted. No one is all bad, Ivy. We are all good and bad. We are all just people doing the best we can with what we have been given. Your father made terrible mistakes, but he is here now, trying. That counts for something, I guess. This time, when Ivy's breathing deepened, it stayed deep. Alara slipped out of the room and found Silas standing by the fireplace, clearly having heard everything. She does not trust me, he said. Would you? In her position? No. Then stop expecting her to. Trust is earned, Silas. You know that. He nodded slowly, then gestured to the loft. I made up 2 separate sleeping areas. You will have privacy. Alara climbed the ladder and found he had created a division using a blanket hung from the rafters. Her bedroll was on one side, his on the other. It was not perfect, but it would work. She changed into a nightgown behind the blanket partition, hyper-aware of Silas doing the same on his side. This was her life now, married to a stranger, sleeping feet away from him, caring for a traumatized child together. She lay down on the bedroll and stared up at the roof beams. How had her life become this? 2 days ago, she had been running a store, living in comfortable isolation, answering to no one. Now she was a wife and a mother, and living in a cabin so far from civilization that the nearest neighbor was probably a bear. She should have been terrified. Instead, she felt something she had not felt in years. Purpose. From the other side of the blanket, Silas's voice came quietly. Alara? Yes? Thank you. For everything you did today. For giving her choices. For being honest with her. For knowing what to say when I did not. We are in this together, Silas. That was the agreement. Still, thank you. She did not know what to say to that, so she said nothing. Sleep came slowly, and when it finally arrived, it brought dreams of schoolhouses and frozen children and little girls with dark braids who looked at her with Lillian's dying hope in their eyes. Morning came too early, announced by weak sunlight through the loft window and the smell of coffee. Elara climbed down the ladder to find Silas already up, tending the fire and doing something complicated with a cast-iron pan. "Thought I would make breakfast," he said without turning. "Nothing fancy, just eggs and bacon." "Where did you get eggs up here?" "Keep chickens in a coop behind the cabin. They are temperamental, but they produce." Of course he kept chickens. Of course this mountain recluse had a fully functioning homestead hidden in the wilderness. Elara moved to check on Ivy and found her still sleeping, curled around one of the wooden animals. The deer, she noticed. She pulled the door closed quietly and returned to the main room. "How long have you lived up here?" she asked. 7 years since the collapse." Silas flipped bacon with practiced ease. "Built the cabin myself that first winter. Nearly died doing it, but I needed something to occupy my hands, something to focus on besides the memories." "You built all of this alone?" "Had help from a few trappers who passed through, but mostly, yeah." He glanced around the cabin with something that might have been pride. "It is solid. Weathered 6 winters without major problems. Keeps out the cold. Keeps out the world." "But you cannot keep out the world anymore," Elara said softly. "Not with Ivy here." His shoulders tensed. "I know." They ate breakfast in silence. Silas had scrambled the eggs with wild onions, and the bacon was perfectly crisp. The coffee was strong enough to strip paint. Ivy emerged from the bedroom while Elara was washing dishes in a basin by the fireplace. The little girl looked rumpled and sad, but more rested than yesterday. "Morning," Elara said. "Hungry?" "I guess." Silas dished up eggs and bacon, setting the plate at the table. Ivy sat and ate mechanically, not tasting the food, just fueling her body. When she finished, she looked at Silas directly for the first time that morning. "What am I supposed to do here?" she asked. "All day. There is nothing. No school. No other kids. No—" "There is school," Silas interrupted. "I cannot teach you proper, but I have got books. Reading, arithmetic, some history, and Elara was a teacher. She can teach you." Elara finished, surprised he had remembered. "If you are willing to learn." Ivy considered this. "What kind of books?" "I will show you." Silas led them to a shelf Elara had not noticed before, hidden in a corner of the main room. It was packed with volumes, worn but well cared for. Ivy's eyes widened. There were primers and readers, mathematics texts, natural philosophy, even poetry. A better collection than Elara would have expected. "Lillian loved books," Silas said quietly. Before I left, she was always reading. I kept buying them after. Told myself maybe someday I would send them to her. Never did, of course, but I kept buying them." Ivy pulled out a volume of fairy tales, the cover decorated with faded gilt. She opened it carefully and found an inscription on the first page. "For Lillian, who sees magic in everything. Love always, Silas." The little girl's face crumpled. "She would have loved this," she whispered. "Then it is yours," Silas said. "All of them. Whatever you want to read." Ivy clutched the book to her chest and fled back to the bedroom. Slamming the door, Silas flinched. "Give her time," Elara said again. She seemed to be saying that a lot. The rest of the day was spent in careful negotiation of space and silence. Ivy stayed in her room reading. Silas chopped wood with punishing intensity, working out his helplessness through physical labor. Elara explored the cabin and the immediate surroundings, trying to understand this place that was now her home. The chickens were indeed temperamental. One tried to peck her when she collected eggs. The stream ran clear and cold, perfect for washing. There was a root cellar stocked with preserved vegetables and dried meat. A smokehouse, a small barn where the gelding lived, alongside a milk cow Ilara had not known existed. Silas had built an entire life up here. A lonely life, but a sustainable one. As the sun started to sink toward the western peaks, Ilara returned to the cabin to find Ivy sitting on the porch steps, the fairy tale book open in her lap. "Mind if I sit?" Ilara asked. Ivy shrugged. Not permission, but not refusal either. Ilara settled on the step beside her. They sat in companionable silence, watching shadows lengthen across the valley. "It is pretty here," Ivy said eventually. "Quieter than I thought anything could be. Does that bother you?" "I do not know yet. Ask me in a week." "Fair enough." "What are you reading?" Ilara asked. "Rapunzel. Mama used to read it to me when I was little." Ivy's finger traced the illustration of the girl in the tower. "I never liked this story. The girl just waits for someone to save her, does not even try to save herself." "What would you do if you were Rapunzel?" Ivy thought about it. "Cut my own hair, braid it into a rope, climb down myself." Ilara smiled. "Practical. Mama said I was too practical sometimes. Said I should let myself dream more." The sadness was back in Ivy's voice. "But dreams do not keep you fed or warm. They do not pay for medicine when someone is sick." 7 years old and already too familiar with hard realities. "Your mother was right that you need dreams," Ilara said gently. "But she would also be proud of how strong you have had to become. Those things are not mutually exclusive." "What does that mean?" "It means you can be both practical and a dreamer. Take care of yourself and still hope for better things." Ivy closed the book. "Do you hope for better things?" The question caught Ilara off guard. Did she? She had spent 6 years just existing. Not hoping, not dreaming, just moving through days and trying not to think about what she had lost. "I am starting to," she said slowly. "Being here with you and your father, it is making me think maybe I can do more than just survive." "That is good, I guess." Ivy stood, brushing off her dress. "I am going inside. It is getting cold." She left Ilara on the porch. A moment later, Silas emerged from the woodshed, wiping sweat from his forehead despite the chill. "She talking to you now?" he asked. "A little. She is processing." "How long does processing usually take?" "However long it takes." Ilara stood, joints protesting. "There is no timeline for grief, Silas. She will move through it at her own pace." He nodded, looking exhausted. That night followed the same pattern as the night before. Ivy had another nightmare. Ilara comforted her until she fell back asleep, then retreated to the loft, where she lay awake listening to Silas's breathing on the other side of the blanket partition. This was her life now. She should have been miserable. Instead, she felt something unfamiliar stirring in her chest. It took her a while to identify it. Hope. The days began to establish a rhythm. Ilara would wake early and start breakfast while Silas did the morning chores, feeding animals, collecting eggs, chopping wood. Ivy would emerge eventually, still heavy with sleep and grief, and eat whatever was put in front of her without complaint or enthusiasm. After breakfast, Ilara began teaching. She started with assessment, figuring out where Ivy was in her education. The girl could read well above her age level, and her mathematics was solid, but her handwriting was shaky, and her knowledge of history was spotty. They set up a school area at the table by the window where natural light was best. It was strange teaching again after so many years. Strange and painful and oddly healing. Ivy was a good student, quick to understand, eager to learn despite her grief. She absorbed information like someone starving for mental stimulation. During lessons, Silas would disappear into the forest, checking his trap lines or hunting. He always came back before dark, usually with fresh meat or firewood or some other necessity. The man was relentlessly practical, but in the evenings after dinner, he would sit by the fire and carve, while Alara read aloud to Ivy. He never said much, just worked his knife over wood with steady, practiced movements, occasionally glancing up when a particularly good passage caught his attention. Ivy started requesting specific stories, adventure tales, mostly, stories about brave girls who saved themselves. She still kept her distance from Silas, but Alara noticed the glances, the way Ivy would watch him carve, fascinated despite herself, the way her eyes would track him when he moved around the cabin. The child was curious about her father, even if she would not admit it. A week passed, then two. The first snow came on a Tuesday morning, soft flakes that transformed the valley into something from a fairy tale. Ivy stood at the window, transfixed. "I have never seen this much snow," she breathed. "Denver gets snow," Silas said from his spot by the fire. "Not like this. Not where everything is quiet and white and perfect." She ran outside without her coat, spinning in circles with her face turned up to catch snowflakes on her tongue. For the first time since arriving, she laughed. The sound hit Silas like a physical blow. Alara saw it in his face, pure joy mixed with devastating regret for all the laughter he had missed. But he did not let it show. He just watched his daughter play in the snow with an expression of such fierce longing that Alara had to look away. That night, Ivy fell asleep almost as soon as her head hit the pillow, exhausted from playing outside. No nightmares for once. In the loft, Alara and Silas lay in their separate spaces, the blanket partition between them. "Thank you," Silas said into the darkness. "For what?" "For today. For teaching her. For being patient. For making this work." Alara stared at the ceiling. "It has been 2 weeks. That is not exactly a success story yet." She laughed today. First time since... He did not finish the sentence. They fell silent. Then, softly, Silas spoke again. "Do you ever regret it? Agreeing to this?" Alara considered the question honestly. Did she regret marrying a stranger, leaving her quiet life, taking responsibility for a grieving child? "No," she said finally. "It is hard. It is complicated, but I do not regret it." "Why not?" "Because for the first time in 6 years, I wake up with a purpose beyond just getting through the day. That matters." Another long silence. "I am glad you are here, Alara." The words were simple, but they carried weight. "Good night, Silas. Good night." But sleep did not come easily, and Alara found herself thinking about the man on the other side of the blanket, about the care he put into carving animals for his daughter, about the way he looked at Ivy when he thought no one was watching, like she was something precious and breakable that he was terrified of dropping. He was not what she had expected when she agreed to this arrangement. He was better, and that was terrifying in its own way. 3 weeks into their strange new life, Ivy started leaving her bedroom door open at night. It was a small thing, barely noticeable, but Alara noticed. She noticed everything about the child now. The way Ivy's nightmares had decreased from nightly to every few days. How she had stopped flinching when Silas moved too quickly. The fact that she sometimes hummed while doing her schoolwork. Small victories, but victories nonetheless. The weather turned colder. Snow fell more frequently, blanketing the valley in layers of white that made the world feel smaller and quieter. Silas spent more time inside, teaching Ivy how to carve wood by the fireplace, while Ilara prepared meals or mended clothes. She had never been much for domestic work back in Redemption Ridge, but here it felt different, purposeful, like she was building something instead of just maintaining. One afternoon, while Ivy was absorbed in carving what might have been a rabbit or possibly a very lumpy dog, Silas caught Ilara's eye across the room. "Need to check the trap lines tomorrow," he said. "Up in the high country. Might be gone most of the day." Ilara nodded, understanding what he was not saying. He was asking if she would be all right alone with Ivy, if she could handle it. "We will be fine," she said. Ivy looked up from her carving. "Can I come?" The question caught them both off guard. Silas's expression cycled through surprise, uncertainty, and something that looked dangerously close to hope before settling on caution. "It is a hard climb," he said carefully. "Cold. Takes most of the day." "I am not scared of cold." Ivy's chin lifted in that stubborn way Ilara had come to recognize. "And I can climb. I am stronger than I look." "It is not about strength. It is about, you do not want me there." The walls went back up in Ivy's eyes. "That is fine. I did not really want to go anyway." She turned back to her carving, but her hands were shaking. Silas looked at Ilara, clearly out of his depth. "Actually," Ilara said, thinking fast, "I was hoping to reorganize the root cellar tomorrow. Could use your help, Ivy. Some of those preserve jars are too high for me to reach comfortably." It was a transparent lie. Ilara could reach the shelves perfectly fine, but it gave Ivy a graceful exit. The girl hesitated, then nodded. "Okay." Silas left before dawn the next morning. Ilara woke to the sound of the cabin door closing and lay in the darkness of the loft, listening to his footsteps crunch through snow as he headed into the forest. When she climbed down the ladder, she found Ivy already awake, sitting at the table with the fairy tale book open, but not reading. "Could not sleep?" Ilara asked. "Kept thinking about Mama." Ivy's voice was small. "She died 6 weeks ago today." 6 weeks. Had it really only been 6 weeks since this child's entire world had collapsed? Ilara sat across from her. "Tell me about her." Ivy looked up, surprised. "What do you want to know?" "Anything. Everything. What was she like?" For a moment, Ivy did not speak. Then slowly, words began to spill out. Lillian had loved books and music. She had worked as a seamstress, spending long hours hunched over delicate stitching that ruined her eyes and bent her spine. She sang while she worked, old songs from her childhood that Ivy still remembered. She made the best apple wick in Denver, according to their landlady. She taught Ivy to read before she was 4 years old. "She was tired all the time near the end," Ivy said, her voice breaking. "But she still tried to smile, still told me stories before bed, still promised everything would be okay, even though we both knew it would not be." "She sounds like she loved you very much." "She did." Ivy wiped her eyes fiercely. "She was all I had, and now she is gone. And I am here with him, the man who left her, left us." There it was, the anger that lived beneath the grief. "Can I tell you something?" Ilara asked gently. "Something I learned the hard way." Ivy nodded. "Anger is easier than sadness. It feels stronger, more powerful. When you are angry, you can blame someone for your pain instead of just feeling it. But anger that does not get examined eventually turns into something that hurts you worse than it hurts the person you are angry at. Are you saying I should not be mad at him? No. I am saying your anger is valid. He failed you and your mother. That is a fact. But if you hold on to it so tight that you never let yourself see anything else, you will miss the chance to have a father who is trying to do better. Ivy's hands clenched on the table. What if I do not want him to do better? What if I want him to hurt the way Mama hurt? The rawness of it stole Alara's breath. Then he will, she said quietly, because he already does. Every time he looks at you and sees what he missed, every time you pull away from him, every time he realizes he cannot undo the past, it destroys him. I see it in his face. Good. The word was harsh, but Ivy's eyes were filling with tears. Oh, sweetheart. Alara moved around the table and pulled the girl into her arms. You do not have to forgive him. Not today, maybe not ever. But do not let hating him become the only thing that defines your relationship. You deserve more than that. Ivy sobbed against her shoulder, and Alara held her, thinking about all the ways people hurt each other and the impossible work of healing. They spent the day working side by side, reorganizing the root cellar as promised, then baking bread, then sitting by the fire while Alara taught Ivy a card game her own mother had taught her years ago. It was peaceful, quiet, the kind of day Alara would never have imagined having. A month ago, Silas returned as the sun was setting, trudging through snow with 2 rabbits and a fox pelt slung over his shoulder. He looked exhausted, but satisfied. Good haul, he said, hanging the animals in the smokehouse. Should have enough meat for another week. At dinner, Ivy was quieter than usual. She pushed food around her plate, clearly wrestling with something. Finally she spoke. Can I ask you something? Silas looked up, wary. Of course. Why did Mama keep your picture by her bed? If you abandoned us, why did she not throw it away? The question hit like a fist. Alara saw Silas's entire body tense. I do not know, he said honestly. Maybe she hoped I would come back. Maybe she wanted you to know what I looked like. Maybe she still loved you, Ivy interrupted, even though you did not deserve it. No, Silas agreed, his voice rough. I did not deserve it, but your mother had a bigger heart than most people. Bigger than mine, certainly. She told me once that loving someone does not mean they did not hurt you. It just means the good parts mattered enough to remember. Ivy's eyes were bright with unshed tears. I did not understand what she meant then. I am still not sure I do. Silas set down his fork carefully, as though he was afraid a sudden movement might shatter the moment. Your mother was the best person I ever knew, he said. Smart and kind, and strong enough to raise a daughter alone when she should not have had to. Every good thing about me came from knowing her. Every bad thing came from walking away. Then why did you do it? Because I was broken and selfish, and convinced myself it was noble. He met Ivy's eyes directly. There is no good answer, Ivy. I made the worst choice of my life, and 2 people I loved paid the price. I would give anything to go back and do it differently, but I cannot. So all I can do is be here now and hope that is enough. Ivy stared at him for a long moment. Then she stood and walked to her bedroom, closing the door behind her, not slamming it, just closing it. Progress, maybe. Silas dropped his head into his hands. That went well, he said bitterly. Actually, it did, Alara said. She is asking questions instead of just being angry. That means she is starting to process. Does not feel like progress. Healing rarely does while it is happening. They cleaned up dinner in silence. Later, in the loft, Alara lay awake, listening to the wind howl around the cabin. Winter was settling in hard now. Soon, they would be truly isolated, cut off from town by snow too deep for the wagon. The thought should have been terrifying. Instead, it felt almost safe. The next morning brought a surprise. Alara woke to find Silas and Ivy, both already up, standing at the window, watching something in the meadow. "What is it?" she asked, climbing down the ladder. "Elk," Silas said softly. "Whole herd came through." Alara moved to the window and caught her breath. At least 30 elk grazed in the snow-covered meadow, their breath steaming in the cold air. A massive bull stood watch at the edge of the herd, antlers like a crown. "They are beautiful," Ivy whispered. "They come through every few weeks," Silas said. "The meadow grass is good, even under snow. I leave them be mostly. Only hunt if we are desperate." They watched in silence as the herd moved slowly across the valley. Ivy's face was pressed against the glass, completely absorbed. When the elk finally disappeared into the tree line, she turned to Silas. "Can you teach me to carve one? An elk, I mean, with antlers." It was the first time she had directly asked him for anything. Silas's throat worked. "Yeah, I can teach you that." They spent the morning at the table, Silas guiding Ivy's small hands as she learned to work the knife properly. He was patient in a way Alara would not have expected, never getting frustrated when she made mistakes, just showing her again how to read the grain of the wood. "Carving is about taking away everything that does not belong," he explained. "You are not making the elk. You are revealing the elk that is already hiding in the wood." "That is stupid," Ivy said, "but there was no heat in it. It is just a piece of wood." "Look closer." She did, tilting the wood in the light, and something shifted in her expression. She was starting to see what he meant. Alara left them to it and went to tend the chickens. The temperamental birds had finally accepted her presence, though they still gave her suspicious looks. She was collecting eggs when she heard voices from the cabin. Raised voices. She hurried back inside to find Ivy holding her hand, blood welling from a cut across her palm. "I told you to keep your fingers clear of the blade," Silas was saying, his voice tight with worry that came out as anger. "You have to pay attention, or you will hurt yourself." "I was paying attention," Ivy shot back. "The wood slipped because you were not holding it right. I showed you 3 times. Maybe you are just bad at teaching." Silas's face went hard. "Fine, we are done for today." He stalked outside, the door slamming behind him. Ivy stood frozen, tears streaming down her face, from pain or frustration or both. Alara moved into crisis mode. She cleaned the cut, which was shallow but bleeding freely, wrapped it in clean cloth, made Ivy sit by the fire with hot tea sweetened with honey. "It was my fault," Ivy said miserably. "I was not holding it right. He showed me, and I thought I knew better." "Accidents happen when you are learning." He was so mad. "He was scared," Alara corrected. "There is a difference. He saw you hurt and panicked because he cares about you. He has a funny way of showing it." Alara sat beside her. "Can I tell you something about your father?" Ivy shrugged, which Alara took as permission. The mine collapse changed him. 17 men died. He survived by crawling through pitch-black tunnels with bodies all around him, not knowing if the ceiling would come down and bury him too. It took 3 days for rescuers to reach him, 3 days alone in the dark, with dead men. Ivy had gone very still. He came out different, Ilara continued, damaged in ways that do not show on the outside. And one of those ways is that he gets scared easily when people he cares about might be in danger. That fear comes out as anger, because anger feels more controllable. How do you know all this? He told me bits and pieces. Ilara touched Ivy's bandaged hand gently. He is trying, sweetheart. He does not know how to be a father yet. You are going to have to be patient with him while he learns, the same way he has to be patient with you. I do not want to be patient. I am tired of being patient. I know. But that is what love requires sometimes. Patience when you do not want to give it. Ivy looked at her sharply. I do not love him. Maybe not yet. But you could, if you let yourself. The girl pulled away, clutching her tea. You do not understand. Actually, I understand better than you think. I have spent 6 years angry at myself for failing someone. That anger became familiar, comfortable. Letting it go meant facing the grief underneath, and that was terrifying. What changed? I came here, met you, realized I could either keep punishing myself or I could try to do better. Ilara met Ivy's eyes. You get to make the same choice. Keep punishing your father for his mistakes, or give him a chance to be better. Either way is valid, but one way might give you a family. The other guarantees you stay angry forever. Ivy was quiet for a long time. Finally, she stood. I am going to find him. Ivy. But the girl was already pulling on her coat and heading outside. Ilara watched through the window as Ivy trudged through snow toward the woodshed where Silas had disappeared. She could not hear what was said, but she saw Ivy's small form approach the massive silhouette of the man, saw her say something, saw Silas drop to his knees in the snow, and then, miracle of miracles, she saw Ivy step forward and let him wrap his arms around her. It lasted maybe 10 seconds before Ivy pulled back, but it was something. It was a start. They came back inside together, not touching, but walking side by side. Silas's eyes were red. Ivy's bandaged hand was clutched against her chest. We are going to try again tomorrow, Ivy announced. The carving, but slower this time. Slower, Silas agreed, his voice hoarse. And I will get you a safety glove. Should have done that from the start. That night, for the first time, Ivy did not have a nightmare. Small victories. The days began to blur together in a rhythm that felt almost normal. Lessons in the morning, chores in the afternoon, quiet evenings by the fire. The snow kept falling, piling higher against the cabin walls until the world shrank to just their small valley. Ilara found herself thinking less about her old life and more about this new one. The store in Redemption Ridge felt like something from another lifetime. That solitary woman who had wanted nothing but to be left alone seemed like a stranger. She was changing. They all were. Silas started talking more, filling the silence with stories about the mountains and the animals that lived there. He taught Ivy how to read animal tracks in the snow, how to tell if a storm was coming by watching the birds, how to find north without a compass. Survival skills, he called them. But Ilara saw it for what it was, a father desperate to share pieces of himself with his daughter. Ivy started calling him Papa when she thought Ilara was not listening, though she still used Silas to his face. Small steps. Progress measured in inches rather than miles. But not everything was smooth. One afternoon in late January, Ivy and Silas had their worst fight yet. It started over something small. Ivy had wanted to explore farther into the forest alone, and Silas had refused permission. "I am not a baby," Ivy said, her voice rising. "I can take care of myself. The forest is dangerous in winter. You could get lost, fall through ice, run into a bear. You go out alone all the time. I am an adult who knows these mountains. You are 7 years old, almost 8. Ivy shot back. "And Mama let me do things by myself. She trusted me." The moment the words left her mouth, Elara saw Ivy realize her mistake. But it was too late. Silas's face went hard. "Your mother is not here. I am. And while you are in my care, you follow my rules. I did not ask to be in your care. I did not ask to be here at all." "Ivy," Elara said, trying to intervene. But the girl was crying now. Years of grief and anger spilling out unchecked. "I want my mother. I want to go home. I hate it here. I hate this cabin and these stupid mountains. And I hate you for not being there when she needed you." Silas absorbed each word like a physical blow. "I know," he said quietly. "I know you do. I wish you had died in that mine instead of those other men. At least then, Mama would not have spent her whole life hoping you would come back." The silence that followed was absolute. Ivy's face crumpled. "I did not mean..." But Silas had already turned and walked out the door, moving like a man in shock. Ivy collapsed onto the floor, sobbing. "I did not mean it. I did not mean it." Elara gathered her up, held her while she cried herself sick. "I know, baby. I know you did not. I am a terrible person. No, you are a grieving child who said something cruel because you are hurt. That is different. But I heard him. Yes, and you will have to apologize and deal with the consequences. But Ivy, listen to me." Elara tilted the girl's face up. "Your father knows you are angry. He knows you are in pain. One cruel thing said in anger is not going to make him stop loving you." "How do you know?" "Because he spent 7 years punishing himself for his mistakes. He understands guilt. He will forgive you because he knows what it is like to need forgiveness." Ivy hiccuped. "Where did he go?" "Probably somewhere to be alone while he processes. Give him time." But when Silas had not returned by nightfall, Elara started to worry. She bundled Ivy into warm clothes and they went searching, following his tracks in the snow. They found him at the edge of the cliff behind the cabin, sitting on a boulder and staring out at the frozen valley below. "Papa!" Ivy called out, her voice small. He turned, and Elara saw his face was wet with tears. Ivy ran to him, nearly slipping on ice in her haste. "I am sorry. I am so sorry. I did not mean what I said. I was just mad, and I wanted to hurt you because I hurt, and I am sorry. I am sorry." Silas caught her in his arms, holding her tight. "I know. It is okay. It is not okay. I said terrible things. You said how you felt. You are allowed to be angry at me, Ivy. I deserve it. But I do not want you to die." Ivy sobbed against his chest. "I do not want you to go away. I already lost Mama. I cannot lose you too." Silas's face crumpled. He held his daughter and cried with her, both of them releasing grief they had been holding too carefully. Elara stood back, giving them space, her own eyes wet. Eventually the tears subsided. Silas carried Ivy back to the cabin. She was getting too big for it, really, but she wrapped herself around him like a much younger child, seeking comfort. They sat by the fire, Ivy curled in Silas's lap in a way she had never allowed before. "Tell me about the mine," she said quietly. I want to understand why it scared you so much. Silas looked at Alara over Ivy's head, clearly asking permission. She nodded. So he told the story, not sparing himself, but not making it more dramatic than it was. He described the darkness, the fear, the sounds of men dying around him, the 3 days trapped underground with no way to know if rescue would come. When they finally pulled me out, he said, I could not be in enclosed spaces anymore. I could not sleep without lamps burning. I could not breathe if I felt trapped. Your mother tried to help, but I was drowning in panic, and I convinced myself she would be better off without me. That was stupid, Ivy said, but gently. Very stupid. Fear makes people do stupid things. Are you still scared? Sometimes. Less than before. Having you here helps. Gives me something to focus on besides the memories. Ivy was quiet for a moment. Then, I am scared too, that you will leave again, or that something will happen to you or Alara and I will be alone. I cannot promise nothing will happen, Silas said honestly. Life is unpredictable and dangerous, but I can promise I am not leaving by choice, not ever again. What about Alara? Ivy looked at her. Are you going to leave when the year is up? Alara met Silas's eyes across the firelight. No, I am staying. Promise? I promise. Ivy relaxed against her father's chest, finally allowing herself to trust. Okay then, we are a family. Yeah, Silas said, his voice thick. We are a family. That night, Ivy insisted on sleeping in the loft again, between them. And this time, when she fell asleep, Ilara's hand somehow found Silas's across the small space between their bedrolls. They held hands in the darkness, neither speaking, both understanding that something fundamental had changed. They were no longer 3 broken people tied together by necessity. They were choosing each other. February brought a different challenge. Ivy woke one morning with a fever that spiked high enough to make her delirious. Alara tried every remedy she knew, cool cloths, willow bark tea, keeping her hydrated, but the fever would not break. By the second day, she was terrified. We need to get her to a doctor, she told Silas. He looked out at the snow. Fresh powder had fallen the night before, making the road impassable. We would never make it to town, not in this. The wagon would get stuck before we made it a mile. Then what do we do? There is a trapper named Carson who lives about 3 miles north. He has got medical training from his army days. If I leave now, I can bring him back by nightfall. That is too long. What choice do we have? Silas's face was drawn with fear, but his voice was steady. I will move as fast as I can. Keep her cool. Keep her drinking. I will be back. He left within minutes, and Alara was alone with a feverish child and her own rising panic. Sophie had died because Alara had not acted fast enough. She could not let that happen again. She sat by Ivy's bed, cooling her burning skin, coaxing water between her cracked lips, and praying to anyone who might be listening that Silas would make it back in time. Ivy drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes calling for her mother, sometimes mumbling words that made no sense. Do not leave me, she whispered once. Please do not leave me alone. Never, Alara promised. I am right here. The hours crawled past. Ilara's back ached from sitting. Her eyes burned with exhaustion and fear. But she did not move from Ivy's side. Just when she thought she might break from the tension, she heard voices outside. The door burst open, and Silas entered with a grizzled old man carrying a medical bag. "This is Carson," Silas said, breathing hard from the run. "Best field medic in 3 territories." Carson examined Ivy quickly, efficiently. He listened to her breathing, checked her pulse, looked at her throat. "Influenza," he said finally. "Bad strain, but she is young and strong. The fever needs to break soon, though, or we will have problems." He mixed something in a cup, herbs Ilara did not recognize, and got it down Ivy's throat despite her protests. "Now we wait," Carson said. "The next few hours will tell us which way this goes." So they waited. Silas paced. Ilara held Ivy's hand. Carson dozed in a chair, apparently able to sleep anywhere. Near midnight, Ivy's fever finally broke. She opened her eyes, clear for the first time in 2 days, and looked at the 3 adults surrounding her bed. "Why does everyone look so worried?" she asked, her voice hoarse. Ilara laughed, tears streaming down her face. "Because you scared us half to death, you impossible child." "Sorry," Ivy mumbled. "Did not mean to." She fell back into sleep, but it was real sleep now, not fever-induced delirium. Carson checked her once more and nodded with satisfaction. "She will be weak for a few days, but she will recover. Keep her hydrated and rested." Silas clasped the old man's hand. "Thank you. I owe you. You helped me dig out from that avalanche 2 winters back. We are even." Carson headed for the door, then paused. "You have got a good family here, Mercer. Do not take it for granted." After he left, Ilara and Silas sat in the main room, too exhausted to move. "I thought we were going to lose her," Silas said quietly. "For a few hours there, I thought history was repeating, and I would lose another person I loved because I was not good enough to save them. But she is okay. She's going to be fine this time." "But what about next time? What if—" "Silas." Ilara reached over and took his hand. "You cannot control everything. You cannot prevent every danger. All you can do is be here and try your best. That is enough." "Is it?" It was enough today. He looked down at their joined hands, then up at her face. "When did you become the wise one?" "Probably around the same time you became the devoted father. We are both learning as we go." He smiled, tired, but genuine. "Yeah, I guess we are." They sat in silence, hands still clasped, until exhaustion finally drove them to their respective beds. But something had solidified between them during those terrifying hours. They were not just co-parents anymore. They were partners, people who relied on each other, trusted each other, chose each other. And somewhere in the process of saving a child, they had started saving themselves. Spring came late to the mountains that year, arriving in hesitant increments rather than a sudden thaw. First, the icicles began to drip, then patches of brown earth emerged from beneath the snow, and finally, the stream behind the cabin ran free and loud with meltwater. Ivy recovered from her illness slowly, spending weeks wrapped in blankets by the fire before her strength returned fully. During those long recovery days, something shifted in the cabin's atmosphere. The careful politeness they had all maintained began to fray at the edges, revealing something more genuine underneath. A real family, with all its complications. One morning in early March, Ilara woke to find Silas already gone, and Ivy sitting at the table, writing something with intense concentration. "What are you working on?" Ilara asked, pouring coffee from the pot Silas had left warming by the fire. Ivy covered the paper with her hand. "Nothing. Just something." "All right." Ilara had learned when to push and when to let things be. "Hungry?" Not really. My stomach still feels weird. You need to eat anyway. Your body is still healing. Ivy made a face, but did not argue. They had gotten good at these small negotiations, the give and take that made daily life work. While Ilara cooked eggs, she watched Ivy from the corner of her eye. The girl had grown since arriving, not just physically, though she had shot up at least an inch, but in other ways too. She carried herself differently now, less like someone bracing for the next blow, more like someone who had found solid ground. After breakfast, Ivy finally revealed what she had been writing. "It is a letter," she said, sliding the paper across the table. "To Mama. Carson said sometimes it helps to write to people who have died, to say things you did not get to say." Ilara's throat tightened. "Do you want me to read it?" "I already sealed it. I'm going to bury it by the big pine tree, the one where Silas showed me the owl's nest." She paused. "Is that weird?" "No, sweetheart. It is not weird at all." They walked to the tree together, Ivy carrying her letter in a small wooden box Silas had carved. She placed the letter inside, closed the lid carefully, and dug a hole in the half-frozen earth with her bare hands. "I told her about you and Silas," Ivy said, patting dirt over the buried box. "Told her I was still mad at him sometimes, but that he is trying. Told her you take good care of me, that I am learning to read animal tracks and carve wood, and that the mountains are quiet, but in a good way. I am sure she would be happy to know you are safe." Ivy stood, brushing dirt from her hands. "I told her one more thing too." "What is that?" "That I think maybe it is okay to love new people even when you still miss the old ones. That maybe having a family here does not mean I am forgetting her." She looked up at Ilara with those two old eyes. "Do you think that is true?" Ilara knelt in the mud and snow, eye level with this remarkable child. "I think your mother would want you to be happy. I think she would be grateful you found people who love you. And I think she would be incredibly proud of how brave you have been." "I do not feel brave. Bravery is not about not being scared. It is about being terrified and doing the hard thing anyway. You have done that every single day since you got here." Ivy thought about this, then nodded slowly. "Can I ask you something?" "Always. When the year is up and you do not have to be married to Silas anymore, are you really going to stay? Or were you just saying that to make me feel better?" Ilara had known this question was coming eventually. She had been asking herself the same thing for weeks now, examining her feelings like they were some kind of puzzle she could solve through logic alone. But the truth was simpler and more complicated than logic. "I am staying," she said. "Not because I have to, because I want to." "Do you love him?" The bluntness of childhood, cutting straight to the heart of things. Ilara stopped, searching for honest words. "I care about him deeply. I respect him. I trust him with you, which is the highest trust I can give. Whether that is love or something that could become love, I do not know yet. But I know I want to find out." Ivy absorbed this with the seriousness of a judge weighing evidence. "He looks at you funny sometimes, when you are not watching, like you are something he cannot quite believe is real. Does that bother you?" "No. Mama used to say everyone deserves someone who looks at them like they hung the moon. I think maybe Silas looks at you like that." Ilara's heart did something complicated in her chest. "We should get back. You're supposed to be resting, not having philosophical discussions in the cold." "I am not tired of resting. I am tired of being sick. One more week of taking it easy." "Carson's orders," Ivy grumbled, but allowed herself to be led back to the cabin. As they approached, they could hear the sound of chopping wood, Silas, working through his own thoughts the way he always did with physical labour. He looked up when they emerged from the tree line, his eyes immediately finding Ivy and doing a quick assessment, checking that she was upright, breathing, intact. "You are supposed to be resting," he called. "That is what Ilara said." "Then why are you not listening?" "Because I am not made of glass. I am not going to break if I walk around." Silas set down the axe and crossed to them. "No, but you are recovering from a serious illness, and I would rather you take a few extra days to heal than push too hard and relapse." "You sound like an old woman." "I sound like someone who spent 2 days thinking he might lose you. So yes, I am being overprotective. Deal with it." They stared at each other, a battle of wills that had become familiar. Then Ivy smiled, small but genuine. "Oh, okay, I will rest, but only because you asked nice." "I did not ask nice. I basically ordered you. I am choosing to interpret it as asking nice." She went inside, leaving Silas shaking his head. "She is going to be impossible when she is older," he said. "She is already impossible," Ilara replied. "She gets it from you." "Me? I'm the most reasonable person here. You literally threatened to fight a bear last week because you thought it was getting too close to the cabin." "It was getting too close, and I did not threaten to fight it. I just encouraged it to leave by yelling and waving an axe. The axe was for emphasis." Ilara laughed, and the sound startled her. When had laughter become easy again? When had this isolated mountain cabin started feeling less like exile and more like home? Silas was watching her with that expression Ivy had mentioned, like she was something unexpected and precious. "What?" she asked. "Nothing. Just, you look happy." "I am happy. That is strange, is it not? A few months ago I would have said happiness was not possible for me anymore. But here I am." "Here you are," Silas echoed. He took a step closer, then seemed to think better of it, and stopped. "I need to tell you something." Her pulse quickened. "All right. When we made this arrangement, I thought it was just about Ivy, about giving her a home and keeping custody. And it was at first, but somewhere along the way, it stopped being just about her." "Silas, let me finish. Please." He looked down at his hands, scarred and calloused from years of hard living. "I am not good with words, never have been, but I need you to know that you have become essential to me, not just as Ivy's caretaker or as part of this arrangement, as yourself, Ilara Voss, the woman who gave up her entire life to help strangers, who reads stories with different voices for different characters, who puts flowers on the table even though they will die in a few days, because she says beauty matters even when it is temporary." Ilara's eyes were burning. "I know the agreement was for 1 year, Silas continued. "I know you said you would stay, but I want to make sure you understand what you are staying for. Not just Ivy, not just this cabin, me too, all of me, including the broken parts that might never fully heal." "I know what I am staying for," Ilara said quietly. "I am not walking into this blind, and that is enough. A life up here with a damaged mountain man and his daughter." She stepped forward and took his hand. His palm was warm, rough against her skin. "Silas Mercer, I spent 6 years punishing myself for failing a child I could not save. I lived in a room above a store and convinced myself that solitude was the same as safety, that if I never let anyone close, I could never fail them." She squeezed his hand. "But being here with you and Ivy has taught me something important. Isolation is not protection. It is just another kind of death. You are both damaged. So am I. But we are healing each other. That is enough. That is more than enough. Silas's free hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. I do not deserve you. That is not for you to decide. I am choosing this. I am choosing you. Both of you. He leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she did not, his lips met hers in a kiss that was gentle and careful and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, Silas rested his forehead against hers. I love you, he whispered. I did not plan to, did not think I was capable of it anymore. But I do. I love you too, Alara replied, and realized it was true, had been true for longer than she had admitted to herself. From the cabin window, they heard a distinct sound of celebration. Ivy, Silas called without turning around. Stop spying. I am not spying. I am observing. There is a difference. Get back to resting. I will, after I finish celebrating that you two finally figured out what everyone else already knew. Silas sighed, but he was smiling. That child is going to be the death of me. Probably, Alara agreed. But what a way to go. They walked back to the cabin, hand in hand, and when they entered, Ivy was sitting innocently by the fire with a book. I have no idea what you are talking about, she said without looking up. I have been reading this entire time. Your book is upside down, Alara pointed out. Ivy glanced down, righted the book, and returned to studied innocence. That night, after Ivy had gone to bed, Alara and Silas sat on the porch, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. The air was still cold, but spring was there underneath it, waiting. Judge Whittaker is coming next week, Silas said. 6-month check-in. I know, everything is different now than it was at Christmas. He will see that. Is that a problem? Silas considered. No, I think he will approve. This is what he wanted. A real family, not just a legal arrangement. We are a real family, Alara said. Strange and unconventional, but real. Yeah, we are. They sat in comfortable silence until the cold drove them inside. Judge Whittaker arrived the following Tuesday with Marshal Brodie in tow. This time, there was no suspicion in their faces, just professional assessment. Whittaker interviewed them separately again, then spent an hour alone with Ivy. When he emerged, his expression was thoughtful. That child has been through more than most adults endure in a lifetime, he said. But she is thriving. Her reading has advanced significantly. She is healthy, well-adjusted considering her losses, and clearly attached to both of you. So you are approving continued custody? Silas asked. I am. Furthermore, I am closing the case. I do not need to return in 6 months. This placement is permanent. Relief washed through Alara like a wave. However, Whittaker continued, pulling out additional papers, there is the matter of your marriage. The original agreement was for 1 year, after which Mrs. Mercer could file for annulment and return to her previous life. That year will be complete in approximately 4 months. We are aware, Alara said carefully. Whittaker studied them both. I am also aware that circumstances have changed. The question is whether you wish to formalize those changes legally. Silas and Alara exchanged glances. What are you suggesting? Silas asked. That you recommit to this marriage, not as an arrangement, but as a genuine partnership. I can file the paperwork to convert this from what is essentially a custodial agreement to a standard marriage. It would eliminate any future questions about the validity of your union. We would like that, Alara said, before she could second-guess herself. Yes. Silas's hand found hers under the table. Yes. Whitaker produced the documents, and they signed them there, making official what their hearts had already decided. After Whitaker and Brodie left, Ivy came out from her room, where she had been pretending not to listen. "So you are really staying?" she said to Alara. "Forever. And you and Silas are really married. Not pretend married. Really married." Alara nodded seriously. Then Ivy launched herself at both of them, wrapping her arms around them in a fierce hug. "Good, because you are both stuck with me too." That night was the first time Alara and Silas shared the bedroom. Ivy insisted on it, saying she was too old to need them sleeping nearby anyway, though Alara suspected she just wanted them to have privacy. Lying in the dark beside Silas felt different than lying separated by a blanket partition. More intimate, more permanent. "Nervous?" Silas asked. "A little." "You?" "Terrified, but in a good way." They lay holding hands, and eventually sleep came. The months that followed established a new rhythm. Silas taught Ivy more advanced survival skills, how to track animals, how to fish, how to read weather patterns. Alara expanded her lessons to include more complex mathematics and introduced Ivy to literature beyond fairy tales. They made trips to Redemption Ridge together now, the three of them a visible family. The townspeople adjusted to the reality of it, their gossip fading from scandal to simple acceptance. Mrs. Thornton cornered Alara at the general store one afternoon. "I was wrong about you," the older woman said bluntly. "About him. I thought you were making a terrible mistake. But I saw you all at the church social last week. That man looks at you like you are the sun itself, and that little girl adores you both." "We are figuring it out as we go," Alara said. "Is that not what all families do?" Summer arrived in full force, transforming the valley into something lush and green. Ivy celebrated her 8th birthday with a cake Alara baked and presents Silas had been carving for months. An entire wooden menagerie. On a warm evening in August, almost a year after Ivy's arrival, the three of them sat on the porch, watching fireflies dance in the meadow. "Tell me again about the day you got married," Ivy said. It had become one of her favourite stories. "Which part?" Silas asked. "The part where you asked Alara, even though you had never talked to her before." "That is so weird." "It was desperate," Alara corrected, "and terrifying. But I said yes anyway." "Why?" Ivy asked, though she had asked this before and heard the answer. Some stories needed retelling. "Because a little girl needed a home," Alara said. "And because sometimes the bravest thing you can do is say yes to something terrifying." "Do you regret it?" Ivy asked Silas. "Not for a single second, even when you are being impossible." "I am never impossible. I am delightfully challenging." "That is what impossible people always say." Ivy laughed and leaned against Alara's shoulder. "I am glad Mama's letters told you about me, even if you never read them when you should have." Silas's expression went somber. "Me too, little bit. Me too." They sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell and stars emerged. An owl called from the trees. The stream murmured its endless song. The mountains stood eternal around them. Inside the cabin, three lives intertwined in ways none of them could have predicted. A damaged man learning to be whole again. A grieving child discovering that love could multiply instead of replace. A woman who had fled her failures, finding redemption in an unexpected family. They were not perfect. Ivy still had nightmares sometimes. Silas still panicked in enclosed spaces. Alara still woke some mornings thinking about Sophie and wondering if she had truly earned forgiveness. But they had each other, and they were learning that healing was not about erasing the past. It was about building something strong enough to carry its weight. As autumn approached again, marking a full year since Ivy's arrival, they planted a garden together. Vegetables for practical purposes, but also flowers, because Elara insisted beauty mattered. "Why plant them if they are just going to die when winter comes?" Ivy asked, echoing Silas's own question from months before. "Because they are beautiful now," Elara explained. "Because 6 months of beauty is better than no beauty at all. Because we plant them knowing they will not last forever, but we plant them anyway." Ivy thought about this, her hands deep in rich soil. "Is that what you did with us? Planted something beautiful, even though you did not know if it would last?" Elara met Silas's eyes across the garden plot. "Yes, but this did not die with the season. This kept growing." "Will it keep growing?" Ivy asked. "Forever." "Nothing is forever," Silas said. "But we can tend it, water it, give it what it needs to thrive. That is what family is, choosing to nurture something every single day." They worked until the garden was planted, their hands dirty and their backs aching and their hearts full. That night, after Ivy had gone to sleep, Elara and Silas lay in bed talking about the future, about maybe adding on to the cabin to give Ivy more space as she grew, about teaching her to handle a rifle properly, about whether they should get a dog. Normal things, future things, the kind of plans people make when they believe in tomorrow. "Thank you," Silas said into the darkness. "For what?" "For giving me a second chance, for seeing past what I had done to what I was trying to become, for loving my daughter when you did not have to." "Our daughter," Elara corrected. "She is ours now." "Our daughter," Silas agreed, and she could hear the smile in his voice. They fell asleep holding each other, and for the first time in longer than either could remember, neither had nightmares. In the years that followed, they would face challenges, harsh winters and illness, and the normal struggles of raising a strong-willed child. There would be arguments and tears and moments of doubt, but there would also be laughter. Quiet mornings watching sunrise paint the mountains gold. Evenings by the fire with Ivy reading aloud, while Silas carved and Elara mended. Small triumphs and large joys, and the steady accumulation of moments that make a life. They would learn that family is not defined by blood or tradition or meeting someone's idea of normal. It is defined by choice, by showing up every day and doing the hard work of loving imperfect people in an imperfect world. Ivy would grow into a remarkable young woman, stubborn and brilliant, and kind in the way of people who have known real pain and chosen compassion anyway. She would carry her mother's memory forward while building her own life, and she would always know that she had been worth the risk of two broken people learning to be whole. Silas would never fully heal from the mine collapse. The scars ran too deep, but he would learn to live with them instead of being defined by them. He would become the father he should have been from the start, patient and present and willing to admit when he was wrong. And he would love Elara with the fierce devotion of someone who had been given a gift he never expected to receive. Elara would carry Sophie's memory too, but it would transform from a weight into a reminder that hesitation costs lives, that action, even imperfect action, is better than paralysis, that we honour the dead by fighting for the living. She would become the mother she had always hoped to be, and the wife she had never expected to become. And she would learn that redemption is not about erasing mistakes. It is about making different choices every day until those choices become who you are. Years later, when Ivy was grown and making her own way in the world, she would return to the cabin with her own family. She would show her children the wooden animals her father had carved, the flowers her mother planted every spring despite knowing they would not last, the mountain valley that had taught her what home really meant. And she would tell them the story of how three broken people found each other and built something beautiful from the pieces. Because that is what families do. They take the fragments of their damaged selves and fit them together until the cracks become part of the pattern, until what was broken becomes strong enough to hold the weight of love. The cabin still stands in that mountain valley, weathering storms and seasons. Smoke still rises from its chimney on cold nights, and if you listen carefully on quiet evenings, you might hear the echo of laughter that once filled those rooms. The laughter of people who learned that the bravest thing you can do is let yourself be loved. The laughter of a family that chose each other. The laughter of three souls who proved that healing is possible even when it seems impossible. That love can grow in the most unexpected places, and that sometimes the family you build is stronger than the one you were born into, because you chose it with your whole heart, knowing exactly what you were getting, and decided it was worth the risk.